This is Grace Notes. I'm Alan Button, and pleased to have in the studio with us today Lillie Anderson. It's that time of year where we see bell ringers, and Lillie, among many other things, is a bell ringer with the Salvation Army. Lillie is a longtime member of the Salvation Army, having grown up in Raleigh, and now serves as chairman of the advisory board of the Nash Edgecombe County Corps. Lillie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Speaking of being a member, tell us what it means to be a member of the Salvation Army.
To be a member of the Salvation Army is like joining any church. That is your church that you go to. I was raised as a member of the Salvation Army Church until adulthood.
And this was in Raleigh?
Yes, that's correct. I started going as a child, and I continued as a member of the Salvation Army through high school, through college actually. And then my husband and I got married, and we moved to Philadelphia. And when we were in Philadelphia, there really wasn't a corps near our home. And my husband had been raised Presbyterian, and we felt that was important. We were getting ready to start a family, and we wanted to be of the same denomination. And so I became a Presbyterian then, but I've always had a very soft spot in my heart for the Salvation Army.
Well, it's a new thing for me personally to think about the Salvation Army as a church. The social services aspect, I guess, is what gets the most press. Tell us about the distinction between church and social services, or how the two come together.
Well, I think they really mesh pretty well. The Salvation Army was started in London, England by William Booth. He was a Methodist minister.
And when was that?
That was in 1865. And there was a part of the population that he did not feel was having their needs met spiritually. They were very poor, and they were not going to church. And so he took the church to them, which is kind of opposite of what we think of church. We usually think of members coming to the church. Well, he took the church to them. And he quickly realized that you cannot talk to someone about their soul or about spirituality when they don't have food and they don't have shelter. And so he realized right then that you needed to meet their social needs as well as their spiritual needs. And out of that came the social services component of the Salvation Army. And I see it as a two-pronged project, really, or a two-pronged program, addressing spiritual needs and addressing social needs.
Well, that's helpful. Tell you what, let's come back in a few minutes to more about the Salvation Army and go back to your growing up years in Raleigh, because you've identified a song that has some connection with that. Tell us about it.
Yes, it's James Taylor's song, Carolina in My Mind. When I was in junior high, I developed this great passion for UNC, Tar Heels, and I set my sights then. I was going to become a Carolina student, I hoped, one day. And so that was sort of my target. And while I was in high school, James Taylor became very popular, and this song was very popular as well. And that just sort of fueled my flame that I was determined I was going to get in Carolina, and fortunately I did. And then after I was married, I told you my husband and I moved to Philadelphia for 4 years. And in that song, James Taylor is addressing sort of like his homesickness for North Carolina. And that was very much how I felt those 4 years we were in Philadelphia. I had a strong homesickness to be back in North Carolina where our families were.
You could relate.
I definitely could relate.
You also are a member of a book club, you were telling me, that has some connection with James Taylor.
Yes, it's like a book club, but we don't actually do books. We do topics each year.
So it's not what do you call it? It's not
we call it the Liberal Arts Club. And,
I see.
And each year we have an umbrella theme, and then each member does a paper or program or report on a topic related to that umbrella theme. And a couple of years ago, I did a paper on James Taylor, actually. So it was very interesting to see his impetus for some of his songs. And this one in particular, he was recording in the Apple studio in England where the Beatles had their studio. And the Beatles happened to be in the studio at the time and actually are part of that song. And he makes a reference to them when he talks about the holy host of others standing around me. It's the Beatles. So that was kind of interesting to hear the sideline on all that.
You know this song well.
I do. It's one of my favorites.
And an expert on James Taylor.
Somewhat.
Very good. Well, let's hear the song, Carolina in My Mind,
Sounds
by
good.
James Taylor.
In my mind, I'm gone to Carolina. Can't you see the sunshine? Can't you just... I'm gone. Say nice things about me, 'cause I'm gone, solid gone.
That was Carolina in My Mind by James Taylor. If you're just joining us, our guest today is Lillie Anderson. Lillie, that song helped you make it through your 4 years in Philadelphia.
Yes, it did.
and you made it back to North Carolina eventually. I know that that song is special to Carolina grads, but you've got some divided loyalties in your household. How does your husband handle that song?
He's a North Carolina State graduate, so I think he just kind of puts up with me.
Well, it is a song. I'm not a UNC grad myself, but I think that's a really special song. Would you agree that it is something that those outside of the university context can relate to?
I would certainly hope so, because it can pertain as well to North Carolina, the state, not necessarily the university. It can be taken both ways, in my case particularly.
Let's pick up, if we could, on your time with the Salvation Army after you got back to North Carolina. Tell us about your involvement, what exactly you do, and how you got to be involved in what you're doing.
Well, when we came back to North Carolina, I became involved ringing the bell again. And then about 4 years ago, I received a phone call from a gentleman on the advisory board, and he had gotten my name, and he was asking me if I would be interested in becoming a member of the advisory board for the Salvation Army. And I told him that would certainly be something I'd consider, because I had a great love for the Salvation Army, and I thought that that would be a good fit for me. So we met and talked about the responsibilities, and I agreed to be a member of the board. So I was voted by the other board members to be a member. So I've been on the board for 4 years, and then I was chosen or asked to be the chairman. And so I am currently in the middle of a 2-year term as the chairperson for the advisory board.
For the Nash Edgecombe County Corps.
Correct. That's correct.
And there are different corps around the state, in fact, around the country, around the world?
Oh, yes. Salvation Army is all over the United States, and even close to us, there's a corps in Greenville, there's a corps in Wilson, there's one in Morehead City, Raleigh, and then the Salvation Army has a presence in over 120 countries. And currently, there are over 1.7 million members of the Salvation Army.
Tell us how the bell ringing got started.
That was an interesting story. The Salvation Army uses military terminology, so their ministers have ranks. And one of the ministers, Salvation Army ministers in California, his name was Captain McPhee. And in 1891, he wanted to provide a Christmas dinner for 1,000 poor people, but he had no funds to do that. And so he thought back to a time when he had been in the military and was stationed in Liverpool, England, and how on the docks there was a pot that people could just throw charitable contributions in. So he got the idea of maybe he could set up such a pot. So he put up a brass urn on the wharfs in San Francisco, and sure enough, he was successful, and he collected enough money to provide meals for those 1,000 poor people. And that's where the birth of the red kettle or the bell ringing came from. And now the bell is rung all over the United States and in many, many other countries where the Salvation Army is present.
Interesting. It's got a real history then.
It definitely does.
How are bell ringers selected?
Anyone who's willing to give their time is allowed to do that. In Tarboro, where I'm from, we have one person that coordinates the bell ringing at the Walmart. And in Rocky Mount, one of the officers for the Corps coordinates the schedule. But anyone is allowed to. You do not have to be a Salvation Army member, and you can ring anywhere. So just anyone who's willing to give their time to do it.
And when you say anywhere, that's assuming the location has agreed to have the bell ringer there?
Yes. We have 8 locations in Rocky Mount that have allowed us to put bells there. And we are very, very appreciative of the businesses that do allow us to put kettles at their establishments. Not everyone does allow that. And so we're very grateful for the merchants in Rocky Mount that have allowed us to do that.
What are the lengths of the shifts, and what is the duration over which the bells are rung?
We usually do them in 2-hour shifts. Some locations will allow us to start before Thanksgiving, and then some require that we start December 1. So that has sort of been staggered, and we do it right up to just a day or two before Christmas. So anyone who's interested in ringing the bell can certainly locate their local Salvation Army Corps, give them a call, and I'm sure they'll be happy to put them on a schedule.
Wherever they are in the state.
Wherever they are in the state, or even in the country.
Okay. How does the bell ringing collection effort fit into the Salvation Army's annual fundraising?
The bell ringing is their only major fundraising event throughout the year, and the funds used are kept right there in the community where they're collected. They do not get dispersed to other locations. They're kept in the community, and they are used for Christmas help for families that need help at Christmas, to provide Christmas for their families. And the funds are also used throughout the year to fund the social services programs, such as the food pantry, the soup kitchens where those are available, helping people with utilities, helping people with food vouchers, helping people with clothing vouchers, also to assist people who experience a disaster such as a fire or a flood. They come to the Salvation Army and can receive help with those bills. So the Red Kettle, or the bell ringing, provides funds for that.
Speaking of Christmas help, you've identified another song that maybe has a connection there, I gather. Little Drummer Boy?
Yes.
Tell us about it.
That is probably my favorite Christmas song. As a matter of fact, it is not Christmas until I've heard that song. I just think it addresses the thought that all of us have something to give, no matter how big or how small, and it's all important. And because the little drummer boy, he says, I'm a little poor boy. What do I have that's fit for a king? And I think that we all have something, and he did find something that he had to offer. And I know when I'm ringing the bell, frequently I'll see people put coins in the kettle. And from the appearance of them, you would think that they could have used that money themselves. They look like they are the ones who would qualify maybe to receive help. Mm-hmm. But yet they were giving what they have. And I just think that that is just so special, and especially at Christmas time, to give what you have, no matter how little you have, you're willing to give of it. And I just think that really addresses the spirit of the humankind at Christmas time, just giving.
It reminds me of the account in the Gospels about the widow's mite.
Yes.
That fit in there?
Absolutely. Yeah. Straight from there.
Well, let's hear the song. Great introduction. Thank you, Lillie. Here it is, The Little Drummer Boy. And we're going to hear the classic version done by the Harry Simeon Chorale. Little Drummer Boy. That was The Little Drummer Boy, done by the Harry Simeon Chorale. Our guest today is Lillie Anderson. Lillie currently serving as the chairman of her local Salvation Army Advisory Board. Lillie, why have you stayed involved with the Salvation Army over the years?
Well, I think because as a young person attending the Salvation Army, it was very much instilled in me philanthropy, that we all need to give back in some way. And that is definitely part of the Salvation Army's mission. Not only is it a Christian organization offering spiritual guidance, but also it really meets the needs of those in need. It has the social component. And I guess I just feel like that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to give back to society, not always be recipients of everything, but to be givers as well. And that has been very special to me. And their mission just really rings a bell with me, so to speak.
No pun intended. Are there needs or experiences that you relate to personally that motivate you to help others?
Well, as a young person in the Salvation Army, I remember during our Christmas break, we were allowed to ring the bell for the Salvation Army once you reached a certain age. And just having the interactions with people expressing gratitude from an early age, and even as an adult, I get the same kind of comments when people are putting money in the kettle about being appreciative of help that the Salvation Army has given them, like after the flood in 1999 when we were flooded by Floyd.
Hurricane Floyd.
Right.
Yeah, and you live in a region very directly impacted.
Absolutely, yeah. And people don't forget when they're given help. And so when they're in the position to help, they do in whatever degree they can. And also, I remember as a young person getting to help prepare the Christmas distribution for the needy families. And that's just always something that has stuck in my mind. And I still do that. I go to our Salvation Army Corps and I help with that. And last year I was there on the day of distribution, and that truly made my Christmas. Just seeing the gratitude of the parents that came in to get the goodies for their children so that they would have a Christmas. Just seeing the gratitude just warms my heart and just really fuels me to want to do more.
Are you optimistic about the future?
Yes, I am. I really am.
Tell us about that.
I think humankind is basically good, and unfortunately, media just seems to give the attention to the negative. And I don't know if that's because of the sensationalism builds viewership or whatever, but I do think that humankind is good. And I feel very optimistic about that. And I have young adult children, and I think about their ideals, and they're not the only ones like that. So I just feel very optimistic about the future of our country. I really do.
Well, that fits in, I think, with another song that you've identified that we'll come to in just a minute. And before we do that, tell us if others are interested in getting involved with the Salvation Army or in helping in some fashion, how would they go about doing that?
You can go online and find your closest Salvation Army Corps and contact them. There are many ways you can help. You can give donations. You can offer to volunteer, not just at Christmas with bell ringing, but throughout the year there are needs for volunteers for various projects that they have going on. You can take your items to the family store, because that is also one of the ways that Salvation Army gets funds from our family stores. There are many locations for the family stores, and those are run by the Salvation Army.
Clothing, for example.
Clothing, household items, furniture, any of that. So we need your donations. Also, we're happy to have you shop there. Those funds are also used to help pay for the social services programs throughout the year, as are the collections made from the Red Kettle.
Very good. Tell us about this song, Thankful, by Josh Groban.
This song is on Josh Groban's Christmas CD, but I really don't think it's necessarily just a Christmas song. I think it's something we should think about all year long. It is about being thankful, and it talks about looking beyond yourself and looking around you and not being so self-centered or self-absorbed, and to look at not only what's going on around you and where you can help, but to be thankful for what you have. And I think we all can look somewhere else to find someone in worse shape than we are, no matter how poor our circumstances might be. There's always someone worse off, and that we should be thankful for what we do have. And there's a line in there that talks about us being the change that we want to see. And I think that's our responsibility. That's sort of a charge for us, that we all should take the responsibility of making the changes in the world that we think should be made. Not always sitting back expecting others to do it, but taking the ownership and the responsibility ourselves to make sure that that change takes place.
I suppose it makes sense as I think about how we tend to function, that when our attitude is one of gratitude, one of thankfulness, it does motivate us to try to make a difference in others' lives. Is that fair?
Oh, absolutely. And I almost said sort of like a pay-forward kind of situation. You know, once you've done it for someone else, maybe they'll be inspired to do it for someone else, and maybe they'll be inspired to do it for someone else. A ripple effect.
Well, Lillie, it's been a treat having you here today. Thank you very much for spending some time with us.
Thank you very much for allowing me to be here.
And Merry Christmas, by the way, Lillie.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you.
Let's hear the song, Thankful, by Josh Groban.
Some days we forget to look up.
You've been listening to Grace Notes, a special program here on Life 103.1 featuring people who may be relatively unknown, but who meet life's challenges in ways that brighten the lives of those around them. Our producer is Christina Dolan. I'm Alan Button, and we invite you to join all of us here at the station again next Friday at 5:30 for Grace Notes on Life 103.1.